Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Today's conversation will spotlight how state leaders are using OBC to drive better student outcomes with a special focus on statewide tutoring initiatives. We're thrilled to feature leaders from Arkansas, Texas, and Florida who are pioneering this work and setting the pace for state level innovation. My name is Jasmine Walker, Director here at the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting. Joining me today are Dr. Brittany Miller, Chief Innovation Officer and Executive Director for the Center for OBC, Narek Rome, Managing Director of Federal and State Policy at Accelerate, Amy Counts, Director of Curriculum Projects at Arkansas Department of Education, Dr. Shantae Duggins, Director, State Initiatives at UF Lassinger Center for Learning, and Dr. Kobe Self, Director of Texas Tutoring Supports at the Texas Education Agency. As you're joining us today, we want to be sure to do a little plug here to make sure that you connect with us here at the Center for OBC by subscribing to our YouTube channel, following us on LinkedIn, and also visiting our website to review some of those key resources that we'll mention in our session today. So here's our agenda for our time together. We're going to start out just discussing the what and the why of OBC, why it matters for improving those educational outcomes for students. We'll dive into a focus on our OBC state-based cohorts, the purpose of them, the structure, and the benefits of launching a state-based cohort initiative. We'll also hear some of those voices from the field, as I shared, well, by doing a panel discussion with those state leaders and accelerate on the lessons learned and what's ahead for their journeys. And then we'll round out our time today with some Q&A because we want to hear those questions and we want to provide those answers. So let's talk about what is outcomes-based contracting, or OBC for short. So what exactly is OBC? OBC has four defining characteristics. First, clear outcomes and responsibilities. Districts and providers agree upfront on specific student goals and define who's responsible for what, creating a true partnership rather than a vendor relationship. Second, payment is tied to results. At least 40% of the overall contract value is contingent on meeting agreed upon student outcomes. This ensures that everyone stays focused on the main thing, which we know is student success. Third is cost effectiveness. This model is where districts pay the full contract value only when students show meaningful progress, providing clear understanding of the investment value. And lastly, innovation incentives. Since districts determine what they'll pay for success, providers are incentivized to find the most effective ways to help students learn. The key phrase I want you to remember as you walk away from today's webinar is in that bottom box down there. OBC empowers partnerships to contract for clear student outcomes and compels mutual accountability for achieving them. It's not just about paying for results. It's about creating the conditions for partnership that make those results possible. So what do we do here at the Center for OBC at the Southern Education Foundation? We help districts and providers implement outcomes-based contracting with a focus on innovation, mutual accountability, and continuous improvement by embedding measurable student outcomes into the contract. The OBC model ensures that districts can make strategic, data-driven decisions, even among resource constraints, keeping student learning at the forefront always. Through technical assistance, research insights, public resource, and cohort-based learning, we here at the center equip states, districts, and providers with the knowledge and the tools to implement OBC effectively. Additionally, we've released the standards of excellence for outcomes-based contracting recently for high dosage tutoring, which establish clear benchmarks for outcomes-based contracting across the K-12 landscape, balancing the need for robust support with accountability for maintaining high-quality contracts that drive meaningful outcomes for districts, educators, and students. So, what's the goal of OBC? But we have three primary goals. First, to improve procurement practices by enabling the buyer to clearly define their desired outcomes from the very start. This enhances the educational procurement process. I often say, who would have thought procurement would be a lever for improving student outcomes? Second, to strengthen implementation by ensuring instructional products and services align closely with their research-backed design during the actual classroom implementation. So not about implementation fidelity, but more so about implementation integrity. And lastly, to achieve meaningful outcomes by empowering districts and providers to work together and achieving results for all students, regardless of background or circumstance. So recently, Stanford, along with the National Student Support Accelerator, we'll drop a link in the chat so you can dive in a little bit deeper, released a report sharing what would a state leader want to know about contracting versus a traditional contract versus an OBC contract, just comparing those aspects of the contract. And what we found is that under an OBC contract, this partnership is more likely to have clearly defined outcomes articulated. It's also that we also found that clearly defined target student population is the intended beneficiary rather than contracting for services for a broad group of students being the contract being more targeted on a specific population allows those benefits to be reaped. Also, tying payment to the outcomes of the defined student population also helps to create a stronger contract as everyone is focused on that main student population as well as the outcomes that are desired for that population of students. Also, the other piece that they found in comparison to traditional contracts is that the OBC fosters accountability for both the district and the provider to ensure high quality implementation right there from the start because it's entered into the contract agreement. Brittany, did you want to add anything there?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany Miller. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Innovation Officer for the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting at the Southern Education Foundation. Really grateful to the SCALE Initiative at Stanford for their partnership on this work and their really clear findings that they were able to share, I think just last week with the world, which essentially, as Jasmine said, there were these findings around how under an outcomes-based contract, we can get a lot more clear about what we're trying to do for kids. I think the piece of this that has been really, meaningful for us at the center and for a lot of the districts, states, and providers that we work with is that there is a path forward where we can get a lot more clear in our procurement practices about what really matters for students. And that's not common practice right now. So it really requires, continuing to have a really concerted effort across the country of what it looks like to hold the field accountable and provide the support necessary to shift to this way of contracting so that we can get really sticky interventions in place for students in the classroom, of which high impact tutoring is, one of the most evidence-based strategies that we have out there. And so I know I'm in good company when I say that we all care a lot about high dosage tutoring, and we also care a lot about making sure that that's implemented effectively. And so we've really seen OBC as a lever to do that. And this study reinforces the fact that it's not common practice. And so we really have the opportunity to learn from this work in order to make it move forward, and really excited for our panelists to come on here in a few minutes and talk about how they're really embracing that at the state level to drive that systems change. Thanks, Jasmine.
Thanks, Brittany. Before we move into hearing some of those voices from the field, we just want to share a little bit more with you around our OBC state-based cohort initiative. just around what it is, why it is needed, who all's involved, and when will it launch, and why is it so important. So when we think about the OBC state-based cohort, it involves many different parties. One of those being the state education agencies, the districts, and often a regional intermediary partner coming together to establish and foster a culture for OBC to support district procurement and instructional interventions. So this state-based cohort work is a systemic move to help create the system that will enable OBC to thrive in this state. So this cohort includes a few things. One of those being it could focus on high impact tutoring, ed tech interventions, or curriculum based professional learning that is tied to HQIM. That is the work that our state based cohorts are focused on at this moment. Technical assistance support for up to 10 participating districts and the state education agency, because I said, again, this is systems work. Workshops to learn about how to develop and also implement the OBC. This is more than just designing a contract, it's also about implementing what has been put into that contract as well. There's individualized coaching from national OBC experts to support these individuals along the way as they bring OBC into their systems. There's also an on-site engagement to observe OBC implementation and action, because to be honest with you guys, looks a little bit different under an OBC. And then lastly, the state education agency is also engaged in technical assistance to build that infrastructure that is needed for the state to engage in an OBC. So, why is an OBC state-based cohort needed? I talked earlier about why OBC, but why is this state-based cohort model needed? Why was it developed? That first thing is for it to increase the use and awareness of OBC among districts, because there's that strategic partnership with organizations and leaders that influence that systemic change. So this is all about creating that ecosystem that will support the use of OBC just beyond even at the district level. And then helping districts to utilize OBC as that maximizing fiscal model to maximize that responsibility, ensuring quality and implementation that leads to positive student outcomes. And then evidence-based spending and grant making and contracting practices, supporting that work. And it takes a system of people to do that and to scale that work. And then lastly, creating again that statewide infrastructure for accountability around that educational intervention that is tied to grant making. So this is all about systems work when it comes to the state-based cohort. This just gives you, on our next slide, it just gives you an opportunity to see who all could be involved when we're talking about state-based cohort work and bringing in OBC into the state system. As you see there, I already named state education agencies, intermediaries, the LEA or districts. Oftentimes, there are some strategic partners to support depending on the context of the state or districts engaging in that cohort, as well as you see the OBC team supporting that work. So, why is it so important? Before we move into our panel discussion, I just want to leave you with this bottom line. What states do matters. The pathway to improve student outcomes runs directly through state level decision making. So that is why the state work is so important. And that is why we have our state leaders joining us today just to share a little bit more from the field of what they're doing and how they are moving toward leveraging outcomes based contracting as a model for how districts are partnering with providers. Just want to do a quick plug before we move into the panel. If you're curious, if you're not already registered, please be sure to check out this link that we just dropped in the chat and join us at our annual convening. This year's convening will be held in Orlando, Florida. The focus is rewriting the rules for build better outcomes. So if you haven't already registered, please click on that link to learn more about our annual convening. The folks that are joining us today in our panel, they will be there as well. So it'll give you an opportunity to hear more about their stories as well as learn from other individuals engaging in this work. Brittany?
Great. Thanks so much, Jasmine. Really appreciate it. And, we have our state fellows on the line with us, and then we also have the federal policy working group, and would encourage everybody to take a look at the website. We have combined the convening and the provider summit this year into one event. And so providers, districts, state education agency partners, funders, intermediaries, nonprofit leaders in general will all be in the room together to engage in this really meaningful work. So definitely encourage you to check it out. And we still have some spaces available for now. So with that, I would love to introduce our panel and our voices from the field. And so if y'all can come off of having your video down, put your video up, then we can get everybody pinned on the screen here. Great. And Narek, if you can, oh, there we go. We got Narek as well. Okay, great. So really, really glad to have you all with us. So we are going to go ahead and dive right in because of course, everyone joined to really hear directly from you all about the amazing work that you're leading forward. So I'm excited to dive in with you. And we're gonna start with introductions with the Arkansas state leader that we have on the call, Amy. Amy, I would love for you to introduce yourself and just give us your elevator speech about what's going on in Arkansas with high dosage tutoring and outcomes-based contracting.
My name is Amy Counts. I'm Director of Curriculum Projects here in Learning Services as part of
Oh,
the.
Amy, can you speak up just a little bit? It's a little hard to hear you.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Amy Counts. I'm the Director of Curriculum Projects here in Learning Services at the Arkansas Department of Education. And we have been engaging in high impact tutoring. We're starting our third year in this work, and it's been through our legislative act, the LEARNS Act, that started this work. Just this past year, we launched the OBC cohort with 5 different districts, and we're really excited about what that is going to further our understanding of how we can then push that across even statewide, because we have, it's a very large investment the state's making in high impact tutoring, so we want to see that return on investment. So there's my elevator pitch.
Great, thanks so much, Amy. And you can see we included a little bit of information here on the slide to help y'all ground in their context. So with that, we'll come back to you in a little bit, Amy, but we'll go on to the next state that's represented here, which is Texas. Colby, would you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work in Texas?
Hello, I'm Colby Self, Director of Texas Tutoring Supports at the Texas Education Agency. I've been leading the charge for 4 years. We do have a level of tutoring provided in statute with House Bill 1416, so that continues. We've been talking about outcomes-based contracting in some variety for several years, but we are kicking off through our ESC Region 20 Tutoring Hub a cohort of about 8 school districts that we're going to lead with the help of Jasmine and Brittany and their team through an outcomes-based contracting cohort. There have been prior cohorts. We've looked to Ector County and Uplift out of Dallas as kind of leading the charge prior. They've been featured on, or Ector County's been featured on prior superintendent calls, and I know some of the resources have been showcased on the OBC website, some of the rate cards and things like that. But we're looking to push the initiative forward and try to make it more mainstream, because we've seen the outcomes as being very positive, and some of the positive effects listed at the beginning of the presentation are what we want for more districts to see overall. Overall, wanting to have some proof points and some Texas specific resources to come out of this. There was a nod at the end of the legislative session, not the special session, but the last session, regular session, to point to encourage OBC um, contracting with providers and districts, but nothing's been solidified with any funding or any mandates of sort. But so there is an appetite to possibly have some legislation moving forward that would encourage probably more of a carrot incentivization of that. So we're excited to maybe have some potential policy recommendations moving forward out of this pilot, and and with the help of Brittany, Jasmine, and possibly Narek, get some proof points of some of the successes of this pilot moving forward. So glad to be here. And we also, part of the tutoring, just want to mention, we've modeled some of our in-kind grants to push on the components of outcomes-based contracting, asking for access and usage as proof points for both the providers and the grantees. So definitely trying to incorporate those concepts where possible, more so than outputs than outcomes, but trying to see how we can integrate those at the state level as well. Thanks, Brittany.
Great. Thanks so much, Colby. Colby was at our very first convening when I had very first started working for the center instead of receiving services from outcomes-based contracting when I was a district leader. And so he's been along in this journey with us for a while, and really grateful to have you here today with us. Okay, so we'll do our last introduction of our state leader, which is with Dr. Shantae Duggins from Florida Tutoring Advantage.
Hi, everyone. Great afternoon. I'm Shantae Duggins here at the University of Florida Lassinger Center for Learning. We are a little bit unique in a number of ways. So, first of all, we are a center within the College of Education at the University of Florida. And during the 24 legislative session that established a tutoring program for the state of Florida, we were named the administrator of that program. And so we work very closely with the state and with districts across the state of Florida on high impact tutoring. Great news, we were able to take last year as a pilot opportunity for us. And so we were able to pilot in a very small way some opportunities to serve districts and students across the state. We've learned a ton. Last year, one of our early wins was that we implemented a few elements of OBC into the contracts that we established with our vendor partners. And at present, we're working closely with the OBC team to identify additional opportunities to lean into a more robust OBC contract with our vendor partners. And so lots of opportunities for us here in Florida to capitalize on our partnership and also to learn from other states as we move into our first full year of implementation.
Great. Thanks so much, Shantae, for sharing. And with that, I will pass it over to our final panelist, which is Narek Rome, co-host of this webinar. So Narek, would love to hear from you, a little bit more about your work. So in addition to co-hosting this webinar, right, we've seen that Accelerate has demonstrated an ongoing commitment to OBC for high dosage tutoring by making it part of your policy priorities and as a competitive preference for your grantees. So would love for you to share a little bit about why this work is so important to you and what you're learning from the field thus far. And we can go ahead and take down slides at this time so that we can see all the panelists a little better. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Brittany. I'm happy to be here. So Accelerate has been making grants to build the evidence base around high dosage tutoring for several years now. And we're very proud to support the OBC Center and the 3 states represented here in that work. The shift, I think, in terms of the state leadership was in our state's leading recovery grant program. In the first cohort, we directly supported grants for tutoring implementation and evaluation, and learned that from that experience that, not surprisingly perhaps, but that dosage and implementation is incredibly key to achieve the desired outcomes that have been mentioned here already in terms of student outcomes. And so in our second cohort of our state's leading recovery grant program, we did add a competitive preference for states that were interested in outcomes-based contracting. And happily, a whole number applied and with that interest in mind. And certainly Texas, Florida, and Arkansas represented here are now doing that. And that has been a wonderful response. And the second thing I want to say in response to your question is that one of the other areas of continued study and exploration is the costs around high dosage tutoring. In the post-ESSER timeframe, where every state legislative appropriations and certainly state departments of education have fewer dollars to work with now that federal stream has been closed off. And so cost effectiveness is a major focus for us, and outcomes-based contracting can help achieve that because of the structure and the slides that we're referencing before in terms of the outcomes, the agreed upon implementation and outcomes that both a district and a provider can agree to in your typical contract. So those are some of the reasons why we've been very excited about this and working with partners like you.
Thanks so much, Eric. Very helpful to get into the meat of it from that state perspective as well, in terms of the fidelity of implementation that we've seen OBC can drive, and how it can lead to a better understanding of cost effectiveness in the space overall. So I'm going to ask Eric one more follow-up question, and then I have some additional questions for our panelists. And then after that, we'll open it up to Q&A from participants. And so if you have any questions, burning questions for any of the folks on the call here, or for the Center for OBC, please go ahead and drop those in the Q&A feature, and we will go ahead and answer those as they're coming in to our panelists as we continue. So Narek, my second question for you is that Accelerate has crafted model legislation to help advance statewide high dosage tutoring work. And so what does this look like for OBC model legislation? And where do you envision this work heading as Accelerate continues to build out its state-based partnerships?
Well, model legislation can be quite helpful because if you're looking for statewide change and systemic change, uh, leaving it alone to the discretion of state departments without having permanent authorization, it can be successful for sure. But ideally, down the road, either having state boards or state legislation that can cement these kinds of innovations into education practice is probably the most desirable. And if anything, it's helpful for identifying the provisions, the actual language that can result in the desired outcomes for program structure and implementation, and how a state can manage an initiative like this. And so we last year we presented or published, I should say, a model policy around high dosage tutoring, and we're updating that shortly. And then this year, with that kind of thinking in mind, along with the OBC Center, we've been working on a model policy for outcomes-based contracting. And the hope is that as this state cohort's work continues and other states have indicated an interest, that we would have this model policy available to them for consideration, again, whether it be a regulatory support or legislative, or just improving their implementation at the SEA level with LEAs as their local partners. And so this model legislation for OBC work is almost done, and it has a number of provisions, about seven provisions, I think it is total, where it's trying to set up a 2-year OBC program at the state level. And it is centered around the standards of excellence that the OBC Center has published that allow for some very defined core elements around how OBC can be effective. It also includes a section or provisions around provider approval, and how an SEA can manage that list of providers. There's support for technical assistance for LEAs at the SEA level. And then also some of the oversight and reporting concepts that will hopefully be found to be effective. And we'll be very closely watching, if this is the first draft of this, how the 3 states represented here, what their learnings are from this work and in this cohort now and the states to come. Both of these policies are enormously evolve and are built to evolve because we learn more and then watch how other states have been responding. And each of these 3 states have unique values to offer in terms of how they're managing and making decisions about their OBC initiatives.
Thanks so much, Nick. That's super helpful. Just want to lift up the fact that the way that the model policy legislation is written is really intended to keep the thing that matters most to all of us central to the work, which is, of course, what children achieve and what students learn in the classroom, right? And so over the work that we've done over time and in partnership with all of the LEAs and now SEAs that we've been working with, we've identified what those factors are that really drive towards quality implementation of services for high dosage tutoring and therefore drive student outcomes. And so really excited to see this work coming live in so many diverse contexts with our state leaders on the call here so that we can keep the main thing, as Jasmine likes to say, which is, of course, our students learning more and how can we make sure that we're incentivizing and holding everyone across the system accountable to that work. So with that, I would love to go back to you, Amy, and I have a couple of follow-up questions about Arkansas's OBC cohort, right? So as you shared earlier, it launched earlier this summer in preparation for implementing contracts this upcoming school year. So would love to hear from you. First of all, what have you been hearing from participating districts? I know we're early on, so please answer that as it's appropriate to. And then what role does your intermediary partner, Forward Arkansas, play in this work?
So the districts that participate have been participating. We've been in conversations with them for a couple of months now, and then they had their face-to-face meeting.
Sorry, Amy, can you speak just a
Back
little
in
bit louder?
May. I don't know. Maybe I need to fix my thing while I'm talking. I'm gonna see if I can do two things at once. There we go. Okay. Maybe I just need to use my big teacher voice.
There you go. Now we can hear you.
break out the high school teacher that I once was many moons ago. No, I think with our districts that are participating, there's just been a real shift in their thinking about, I'm not just going to say high impact tutoring contracting, but contracting even in general. Specifically with high impact tutoring contracting, they're being much more intentional about what they want and the students they select for services. And then really thinking about how they're going to, like, what success looks like and what they want it to look like. And so I think just overall being more strategic about the supports they put in place. It's definitely, I think sometimes high impact tutoring has gotten, like, districts have treated it like ed tech where it's one size fits all and you just kind of go with that model. And it really, high impact tutoring is not, no services provided to students should be one size fits all. Let me be clear about that. But especially with high impact tutoring, it does need to be very intentional. I think that has been their shift. They're asking more specific questions of vendors than they ever have before. And I think that means they feel empowered to ask those questions and to, really establish and know what they want. Additionally, I think for the participants, they've really had to do some reflecting on what they need to do, their inputs, to have it be successful. So what are the resources that they currently have that they can leverage, and what are the things that they'll actually need to procure, or systems and protocols and processes that they need to put in place in order for their part to be, their contribution to make this successful and work. So that's kind of on the district sides and how that's shifted their thinking. We partner with Forward Arkansas as the intermediary for this work. And it's really about money and capacity, if I want to be honest. I'm pretty transparent. This work is being funded through the Walton Philanthropy Group. And so they help handle the finance and the money side of it, which is a huge benefit to our office because I don't know if y'all know anything about state work, but there's like no capacity ever. So they have helped keep districts informed, keep them in the loop. So they've been that communication with them. Our role was initially to target districts, to find recommendations for which ones we think would be a really good fit for this cohort. And then Forward Arkansas has moved from there for like just managing some logistics, and they've looped me in as needed. And so that's kind of been their role. And we couldn't, in full transparency, without that intermediary. I loved the part that you said these are the people who could be involved, with this work. For me in my office, if I didn't have them, we wouldn't be able to do it because their role in facilitating the work moving forward. So there you go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate that. I loved how you were talking about that intentionality and like how much more strategic your district leaders are being not only in communicating what they want with their vendors and providers, but also what they have to change, right? And so I think that that speaks really nicely to one of those standards, which is that mutual accountability that's built into the contract, where it says, this is what the provider is responsible for in order to, fulfill their responsibilities to get to the outcomes for kids. And it's not a one-way street, right? Districts also need to analyze like what is their internal capacity and how might they have to shift processes in order to really get there. So thank you for sharing that around that mutual accountability, and shout out to our partners at Forward Arkansas. Obviously we think of OBC as really a team sport, as one of our staff says, which is, that we really need to work collaboratively and in partnership with one another in order to accomplish the work. And so really grateful in Arkansas to have that additional capacity and support through their intermediary partner, and something that other state leaders that are considering this model should definitely take into account, because they do have so much context, that relationship already with the district. So Forward has also been hugely helpful to us in partnering with Arkansas to understand more about the local context in order to ensure that we're really creating a contextually relevant model for each of the states that we're working with, including in Arkansas. So thank you so much, Amy. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Colby. So Colby, you already spoke a little bit to this, but of course, there's been several Texas LEAs that have been very active in OBC since inception. So what would you share about the momentum and the vision for the fall cohort launch? And then also, I would love for you to spend a little more time talking about how Texas is building the provider marketplace for OBC.
Definitely. Thanks, Brittany. We wanted to host our own cohort. We've been hosting. Y'all hosted or co-hosted a webinar with us that we posted, and the commissioner, uh, you know, showcased OBCs in Ector County as part of a superintendent call. So we've been saying, hey, OBC's great. Here's some proof of concept, but the cohort's really solidifying through Region 20 is our intermediary here to help stand this up. But just saying, hey, we're putting forward up to 8 school systems to go through this process. And on the backside, I think you hit the nail on the head. We're looking from a state standpoint to also build up providers that are there, because you can't have contracts, OBC structured contracts, without providers that are willing to engage in that discussion and go through the process as well. So we're going to start looking at our existing providers. Some have gone through the annual conference and are engaged in the OBC work already. Some are not. So I think that's the low hanging fruit. We've already started the conversation with existing providers, and just looking overall, like how can we bring them on board? They've already shown an interest. I don't know if that's because they're already working with us or if there's truly an interest, but I think there's an easy transition point there. They're already on a list. They're already working with us. It was named in House Bill 2 as, this is a pathway. OBC may be a way that these districts want to engage. So there is an appetite or discussion point there leading up to this. Getting some Texas specific contract language, there's some nuances there. An updated case study coming out of this may have more meaning to some Texas leaders. Texas is unique. We have scale. We have 5 million students. We have 1,200 school systems. So our scale is a little different than most states. Some leaders want to see, is it done in Texas? How's it? Things are different in Texas. We hear that a lot. So sometimes they want to be able to call up a colleague or see a neighbor and talk to them about the ins and outs. How did you navigate this and that? Changing hearts and minds is important. So I think this cohort's going to be key to turn the tide, so to speak. Another concept or I don't want to say thing I didn't consider is when I started talking to the regional service centers. We have 20 throughout the state that help train and serve their regions. is we had some discussions with the core group, so it's upper leadership for the regions, and I gave them a brief overview, like Jasmine did, about what is outcomes-based contracting. Many of them had not heard of it, but some of them had. One of the larger urban regions was thinking about it because they do service contracts with the districts, and they are exploring this concept for their contracts to engage the districts to ensure that they're showing up, to ensure the partnerships are solidified. So we may have another avenue I hadn't considered there. Like, how could this leverage our regional service centers and the relationships with districts? At the state level, our grants team is looking at more of a continuation grant structure. Like, how do we get the grantees to engage more with the grants and ensure they're following through on that? So some of these concepts I think are going to benefit ultimately students in several different areas. So I'm glad to have Brittany and Jasmine and y'all's team as a partner, and I look forward to engaging. I think this potentially could have multiple areas of impact. And back to your question about the providers, we have to build capacity in providers. I think they're willing to say, "Oh yes, I'll engage in this," but looking internally at the support and structures and willingness to do the work. And we do have some great providers that have been there, done that, and could write a book on it. So also leveraging their experience at the convenings to bring along other providers. I know it's competition, but it's for the good of the whole. But those experiences of here's what I've learned, those pearls of wisdom, I think does benefit the whole group. In writing RFQs, RFPs, however that may work, I think does benefit the whole system, both on the grant side, the district side, and even us at the state side overall.
Great, thanks, Colby. I think what's interesting about what Colby was sharing, and kind of building on Amy, what you were sharing is that there's a lot of different ways to do this work at the state level, right? And the thing that I've heard from both of you is the importance of partnership and identifying like who are the key players that are going to enable the system to shift in this direction. So in the case of Texas, the regional service centers serve in a lot of these roles. And so the regional service center for Region 20 is the one that's hosting the OBC cohort in partnership with TEA so that we can really continue to leverage the systems that are already in existence in the state in order to enable that contextual understanding of what makes the most sense in Texas to really come to bear. And I love what you were also saying about the providers, Colby. We really consider our providers our partners. We actually had somebody on a panel last year at our convening that, an audience member said, so like, what does your vendor do for XYZ? And she corrected them and said, I'm sorry, we don't refer to them as vendors. We refer to them as partners now because they've really shifted that relationship to be focused on partnership and service of student outcomes. And we've heard from our districts over and over again, right, that it's really challenging to make sure that each provider that they're going to go into this agreement with really understands the model because they are really busy people and they have a lot of work. And so the leadership at the state level to really understand what's required of this relationship and how to partner effectively with their providers is a real strength of what we're seeing in this state-based model and then the leadership that all of you are doing in your contexts. So with that, I'm going to go over to Shantae. And Shantae, this actually is really applicable to you all in terms of your relationship with the providers. So FTA's context is unique. And so as the grant manager for the state, UF is contracting directly with providers. So would love to hear a little bit about how you've been planning for enabling mutual accountability between districts and providers to ensure strong implementation fidelity when services start this fall.
Thanks, Brittany. Let me first start by saying that we are the new kids on the block. And so we love learning from others. And when I first learned of OBC, Jasmine can tell you, I was like, I'm sold. Like, it makes total sense. I think gone are the days when we're just writing checks. I love that payment is contingent on those agreed upon outcomes that are all geared towards student impact. So as I mentioned before, we're moving into our first full year of implementation for the Florida Tutoring Advantage. And we really tried this year ahead of the new academic year, starting to be more intentional about creating those conditions that we know will enable that mutual accountability that you speak of, for both our districts as well as our vendor partners. And so, with that, we've done a lot of planning, we've done a lot of listening, and we try to be more explicit about student eligibility for one, and the outcomes as well as the outputs for our partners to ensure that everyone knows what success looks like, especially for the population of students that we're serving, because they're all striving students in reading and mathematics. And we have MOAs with our districts, as well as contract agreements with each of our different vendor partners that really outlines roles and responsibilities. And so folks know what each other is accountable for and also aligned to. We've also included for the first time this year, because of all of the lessons that we've learned from you all, in our partnership with NSSA, a project plan. So that's essentially our roadmap. So we can speak to all of the details. There's a logic model, the focus on attendance. And so all of those things are explicit and outlined from the onset. And so that's going to be a game changer for us. And then just building in that feedback loop. So identifying opportunities for regular check-ins, utilizing the data that we'll have access to through our vendor partners, as well as data that we'll receive from the state, just to create space for that collaboration and that real-time feedback. I think that's something that I've heard across what you've shared, Amy and Colby, as well as the power of collaboration. And so that's something we definitely want to lean into. And then lastly, providing different types of implementation supports. And so we are creating toolkits for our districts and our providers to identify opportunities for observations. And so ultimately, with all of that being said, our approach is really grounded in partnership because we are so new. I know lots of the providers aren't new, but our context is certainly different, like you mentioned, Brittany. And so just being able to be committed to outcomes for students, fostering that trust with our districts and our providers, being transparent in what we're asking folks to do, and seeking opportunities for just to be curious and to continue to improve.
Thanks so much, Shantae. I think it's really important to recognize, we're not talking about 8 districts in Florida. We're talking about what, 70? Is that right? Something like that?
So we anticipate that we'll be working with about 50 districts in the upcoming year.
Okay, yeah, so 50 districts, so very different scope of work in Florida. And so certainly I think we'll all be curious to see how this scaled approach goes and where we can learn forward together in terms of what it looks like for the grantor to be more of the partnership and the contractor. I think, Colby, there'll certainly be a lot for your regional service centers to learn about where there's opportunities for them to be the contractor and what it looks like to ensure that mutual accountability is in place with individual LEAs as we move forward. And then the other thing that I would say is, like, all 3 of these states have really robust resources on their websites that go through, what it looks like to set up a high dosage tutoring program. Of course, NSSA and Accelerate have wonderful resources for this. And so for those of you on the call, please know you are not alone. Depending on where you are in the journey, there's definitely plenty of resources out there to support you in your work. And of course, we at the center have lots of resources available free for download as well. So with that, we're going to move into questions from participants. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. And then Lupita, would love for you to just drop the link to the convening into the chat one more time, just as a reminder for folks. If you are interested in what you've heard and want to learn more, then certainly encourage you to take a look at our upcoming convening. It should be a really, really exciting opportunity for everybody to come together and continue to learn about this work. So with that, we'll go ahead and put back up the deck. And begin our closeout. So if you can go to the next slide. So what is ahead for us if you already are signed up for the convening and you're saying, okay, great, what do I do next? So please go ahead and register for that convening. Like we said, that'll be a really good opportunity to continue the work for. And then we also have convening communication toolkit that we'll be sharing out for this group exclusively, that has ready to go messages, graphics, and templates to invite your colleagues and networks to get involved in this work. Because of course, while the SEA plays a really critical role, it's a really good opportunity to bring some of your LEAs alongside you so that they can really understand what this looks like. And of course, from the provider perspective, to also understand what this looks like in order to move the work forward. And I think we have one question that came into the chat. It looks like the question is from Southern California. Hi, Sharon. Thanks so much for joining us. Can I use any of this information for our tutoring center in California? I think that the answer to that is yes. We certainly have plenty of resources, and we're actually also launching a California cohort in January. So shout out to our SEA leaders from California that are on the line. They decided to listen in today instead of to speak to the work that they're doing, because we're very early on in it. But certainly we're very happy to share the resources available, and all the resources I mentioned on each state's website are available for public download. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And then the next question is, has Texas determined which districts are participating? Colby, do you want to take that one?
No, we have not. We do have some webinars coming up, so we're sharing out that information, working with Jasmine on getting, we do have those scheduled, so we're sharing out that information through our channels. We've had a couple of districts show interest in that, but we're in that information sharing phase right now to get that solidified. And we'll have the official kickoff in October for that cohort there. But if you have a district interested, shoot me an email. We definitely want to connect. But we've communicated through like our core group, which is the regional service centers, our chief academic officers. Region 20 is also communicating through channels. So just lots of different channels here at TEA and Region 20, and it's been part of any of our teacher incentive allotment conferences and things like that. So our help desk is also available too if a district wants to reach out.
Great. Thanks so much, Colby. A lot of opportunity there. So we have a one-pager to learn more about our state-based cohorts. So certainly feel free to click on or use your QR code there for that one, and feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to chat with any state leaders that are interested in learning more. And yes, Carol, we can certainly share this deck with everyone following the webinar. It looks like I have another question from Daniela. So for high impact tutoring, are there OBC contracts used primarily for out of school time? If during the instructional day, was there any concern about competing with certified teachers?
I can start, Brittany. So in Florida, we are utilizing an in-school model, and so services that are being provided to students happen during the school day. We also work closely with the districts to identify the best time for students to receive tutoring supports, such that it doesn't conflict with other opportunities for them to receive core instruction.
Great, thanks so much, Shante. Colby or Amy, any thoughts on that question? No? Okay, great. Well, with that, I'll keep an eye on the Q&A, and we can certainly keep the Q&A open, but don't want to keep you for any more time than we need to. So really
Brittany,
want to
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I couldn't see the question on there. No, our tutoring for our case doesn't have to be a certified teacher. It's not mandated for that, but that's never been a concern in that case. I guess the question is there problems with like a competition piece? So that's never been a concern on that end, if that's the question piece that they're asking.
Yeah, great. That's great. Thanks so much, Colby. I appreciate you chiming in there. All right, well, with that, thank you all for joining us. Huge thank you to our panelists and co-hosts at Accelerate for the time today. And we will be sure to follow up with an email with all of that information for you all to take under consideration. And thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.